Dear colleagues, good afternoon. We're beginning practically on time, and I'd like to say we have 1 hour. This year at Phinopolis, our sessions are not 90 or 120 minutes, but 60 minutes instead, so that the discussion is dynamic and you have opportunity for breaks between sessions. Also, Sergey Solonin will leave slightly earlier because he has to catch his plane, and we will help him to catch his flight. But if he doesn't, he will come back and we can continue tonight. And first of all, I'd like to introduce our guests. Fabio Chesini, Director Research from consulting agency Gartner. Welcome. Loretta Joseph, Consultant on Blockchain and FinTech issues. Artem Tolkachev, General Director of Tokenomica and the founder and creator of an online platform for asset optimization, Sergey Solonin. Many of you know him. He is a general manager of QIWI. In our country, he is the man who loves trying new things and innovating. It doesn't always work out, but sometimes it does. So we're going to talk to him about what he was able to achieve in his sector and what he would like to warn us against. Alexander Ivanov, the founder and general manager of Waves. Alexander, please identify yourself. Thank you. And Mr. Maloro, the University of Tsinghua. We would also like to discuss with Mei-Lo national Chinese currency, because yesterday the deputy governor of Chinese Central Bank began this discussion. He said many interesting things, but we'd like to find out how is it going to work in detail. And first of all, I would like to begin with saying that many of you have been here, have been at the forum, at consecutive forums, and we would like to dedicate this session to practical projects and practical targets achieved with using our technologies. Now, I've been watching the previous Phinopolises, and it used to be largely theoretical. However, time has passed. We are seeing some successful or unsuccessful cases. We have a better understanding of cryptocurrencies, its pros and cons. We've got the new stablecoins. We need to look at it and see what it is. And there are national banks, the regulators, issuing their own digital currency, and they're close to bringing it to the market. And if you know the name of the session, we put a comma, we didn't put equal. There is blockchain technology. This is infrastructure that provides lots of capabilities, but it doesn't equal national currency or digital currency, cryptocurrency. It can be used for that. There is also cryptocurrency such as stablecoins, and there is national digital currency that can combine the qualities of private crypto assets with government guarantees, and also blockchain technologies. I would like to ask my colleagues, when they speak, to clearly define these concepts, these terms, because quite often we call crypto assets, we call blockchain crypto assets, and we call other private cryptocurrencies blockchain. So there are different things. And now, if we look at the statistics of investments into blockchain, year 2016, since 2016, it has grown fivefold. It used to be $5 billion, and now it's 2.7. So we are close to $3 billion. Against the background of investment into other technologies, it isn't much, but this is significant growth that states that this technology is very interesting, attractive, and investments are being made. It is still being perfected. My first question is for Fabio. Fabio, you are the largest, you're one of the largest consulting company in many types of technologies. At the same time, you're able to observe trends. You're able to assess projects, whether they're successful or not. And I hope you're able to predict the future, to make some forecasts about a particular technology or these currencies in the nearest 3 years. You probably won't tell me about 5. I'd like to know at least about 3 years. And I'd like you to give me your vision, please.
Thank you, Olga, and thank you very much for having me today. It is quite interesting because, as you know, we have what we call our hype cycle, in which we are keep track about how blockchain technologies it's being adopted across the entire industries. Blockchain technologies, as you might seen in our hype cycle, and if not, I invite you to look at it. Blockchain technologies it is almost at the truth of disillusionment, as we call it, which means truth of disillusionment. It is because there is actually very less value that can be generally derived out of this technology. In fact, back in 2016, we did a prediction that says that 85% of the so-called blockchain projects will fail to save any kind of money. And if you ask me that same question nowadays, I should go up to maybe 95 or 99%. And the reason for this, it is because we need to put, and going to your question about making correct definitions, right? One thing is when we speak in terms of blockchain as a capability, at the end, blockchain as a capability is no more than a data structure, a way to secure a single version of the truth. But then it is a matter of looking at blockchain as a more kind of a broader platform, okay? And in fact, due to this truth of disillusionment, one of the things that customers were asking us is, hey, Fabio, can you tell me exactly what are those characteristics on why these projects are, let's say, failing or not able to derive value? And that's the reason why we presented in our Cape Town Symposia this year, and this is being presented also in the other countries. We identified 4 key impediments for what we call these, as we call them, blockchain-inspired solutions, because at the end it's not about the entire digital ecosystem notion of blockchain. And those are governance, interoperability, integration, and standards. There is a huge fragmentation around this topic. And if you put all these, as we call, impediments together, it is really hard to see how organizations might derive value due to the overhead operating cost and also the interest behind the creation of this type of use cases. So now going more to the future, right? Because then the question is, then so what, right? Why there is so much hype and how...
Нет, Фабио, вы не ответили на мой вопрос.
Fabio, I'm sorry, you haven't answered my question because I asked you to give me some specific projects that were successful. For example, some securities or bonds or maybe some private currencies. In your experience in the last 3 years, what have you noticed?
Yeah, what I noticed is that all these type of projects are at a very nascent stage, so I cannot say that these are successful in a way. I mean, and also how we should measure successful, right? I mean, it's about, mass adoption. It is, which for me, when I think about successful, it is about that society is actively using it. So we cannot say that yet. They are very niche use cases so far. So I'm going to your question. That's why it says, in a private permissioned space, I didn't see any successful use case so far with a concrete return on investment that shows me, a sustainability on those projects. Hopefully this answers your question.
Спасибо.
Okay.
Да. Теперь второй вопрос.
Yes, thank you.
So that's okay. So words to clarify. So that's why for me, what customers are asking us is, okay, Fabio, we are getting it. It is about all these key impediments that is really hard to find a concrete return on investment, which are moving alone. So, but then, so what? What's next, right? So that's why we created what we call the blockchain spectrum. And what we are saying is that we are moving from what we call the blockchain-inspired solutions, which are mainly in the private permissioned domain, and we're moving toward, let's say, the companies that will start climbing at the loop of enlightenment, as we call in our hype cycle, right, are the ones that will look at the convergence between these private permissioned blockchains and the public blockchains. We call blockchain complete because they have the 5 key components when we look at blockchain, which are about distribution, encryption, immutability, tokenization, and decentralization. And that's why, let's say, when we look at the convergence between these two things, certainly stablecoins and central bank digital currencies are the catalyst for making that happen. At the end, with no liquidity, it is really hard to realize the value. And then, let's say this blockchain complete will last until 2025. That's the way we see it at Gartner. And then if we look even more further into the future, 2025 onwards, we will face what we call the blockchain enhanced solution, which is where the programmable money comes from. And this is not just about blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies, it is also at the convergence with the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Loretta. Please help us, because it seems to me that you've been a consultant in blockchain. You know for sure which projects, and let's take banks, which projects already were effective at the level of banks. Also, there are 2 well-known platforms, Core the Repo, that operate on blockchain and work differently. They are actively capturing the market, and developers even went further. They opening up their code, although they announced it's an open code. They found out that actually this system has some closed key. They are not so open. And now they demonstrate their readiness to make these platforms with open code, so anyone can take advantage of any of these platforms. So first, banks and projects that are really in production and not just at the level of research and development. And the destiny of Core and RIP.
Thank you, Olga. I'd just like to express my thanks to the Bank of Russia for having me. It's a real honour and a pleasure. So, of the projects I'll get to, so we need to understand first that DLT, distributed electric ledger technology, and blockchain are different. Blockchain technology is the underlying technology that backs the first application was Bitcoin. Disintermediation of markets, it's a database. The issue is that we look at blockchain as a fancy word for a database. We use databases every day, but until date they've all been centralised. So the Bitcoin database was the first decentralised database we've seen. For me, in the banks, I was a trader. I was a banker for many years. The T+3 settlement of things like securities, bonds, other asset classes, there's always been an inhibitor for banks in costs, and processes and procedures of back offices are very, very expensive. So at the moment, we've seen the banks run at putting in innovation departments and trying to deploy, I guess, a solution with a problem. Now, there's only been a lot of pilots to date. The one application that we're seeing where the product of money, Cryptocurrencies, works. There's a couple of projects that I've seen that are actually working. One is in trade financing. An Australian bank called CBA is doing a trade financing with some banks in Asia to help disintermediate the supply chain and the financing of trade. We're also seeing the World Bank and a number of banks doing atomic swaps in interest rates, so atomically swapping bond markets. These infrastructures are not fancy, they're not sexy, they're not the applications that everyone wants to look at. They're just automating and making more security back office processes. The T+3, the post-trade processes we are seeing coming to banks, there are some projects that are coming to light, because clearing and settlement's a big problem. For banks, it's always been very costly, compliance costs are very high. The Australian Stock Exchange is about to launch its blockchain solution for post-trade settlements, which all the Australian banks are part of because they're part of the ASX. So that's one. And I said the atomic swaps. I think stablecoins are coming in. I think we need to look at how stablecoins are asset-backed coins. Tokenisation of many things, from commodities to securities, is coming into being real, and there are banks that are looking, that are actually doing that. What else? I think cross-border payments is a challenge, and everybody can say they can do it, but to date I haven't seen a successful movement, bar probably the Bank of Canada doing a cryptocurrency transfer with the MSA, the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And I think it's not a silver bullet, as Fabio was saying. Blockchain is just, it's a fancy name for a database. There is a lot of impediments to it being implemented at scale. Banks ran at it with a lot of money because Bitcoin was the first application and they thought it was going to disintermediate them. We haven't seen that. So that's my use cases. I think the most interesting one is the World Bank one with the CBA on bonds. But again, it's not a large market. There are very few people that trade green bonds. It's a very good use case, but we will see if it gets transferred into commercial bonds.
Well, in Russia we have similar situation, and what we see is where banks went to piloting distributed registers, that's letters of credit, warranties, securities, where you can see effect. So far, distributed registers have not confirmed its ability to replace processing of payment systems and online transactions, and especially cross-border. You gave experience of Canada. Canada has been experimenting with it for a long time in this pilot, about 4 or 5 years, but so far, unfortunately, except small amount of transactions that they continue to pilot, Canada has not come out with an industrial solution, and you know about that. Core and the Ripple, the question that I asked, they are construed really for online payments, and the idea of Core the Ripple is transboundary. And all hope that for 2-3 years they will attract a lot of participants, but these platforms were not able to replace a significant part of the market. So the question is, whether we need to think about technologies, speaking about settlements of online and security, and it's not necessary to introduce any currency here, because if you have this technology, then you don't need any currency inside. Or we consider this technology not only in terms of settlements, but also new instruments for investments inside the system that we also need to motivate the client, and he has to get 2-in-1 online settlements and potential income that they can get thanks to this instrument. So what's your opinion on that?
So I think if you look at when do you need a blockchain between banks and governments and central banks, the only time you need a blockchain is when you have competitors that are collaborators that need to share data in a network, but they don't trust each other. That to me is the only time that you need to have a blockchain, because it's about trust. It's been about trust. We disintermediate markets and we remove the need for a middleman. We trust the system because we trust maths. 1 + 1 = 2. We don't necessarily trust each other. And I think what you're talking about, some of these pilot projects, yes, they are built on proof. There's a difference between proof of scale and proof of work. Some of these pilots we're seeing sort of in the central banks, there is no empirical evidence as yet to moving everything from having stuff in a vault to a digital world if it works. And I haven't seen the 2 examples that you gave, that out of pilot stage we can actually do that at scale. I think the mathematics behind the open blockchain and the private blockchain are different. So in a consensus model in a private blockchain, you trade everything off. So there's a trade-off against security. Open blockchains like Bitcoin are incredibly secure to date. We haven't seen quantum computing be able to hack that yet. But on a private, a permissioned blockchain, you have a number of nodes that all share the same information. Is it that secure? No, but there's an economic social trade-off. And the projects you've mentioned on the coding, yes, we'll wait and see. But I think the achievements that you've seen in the last couple of years out of some of these, like the Ethereum guys and some of the other ones, it will come to fruition, but it's not an instant win. These things take a really long time. And, you know, regulation is difficult as well, and central banks are very wise not to just run at putting in, you know, a cryptocurrency based on public blockchains or even any of the private ones we've seen, because we still don't know.
Спасибо. Вопрос Александра.
Thank you. Question to Alexander. Can you try to answer my last question that I asked Loretta? So if we build a system and technologies already existing in the market, online payments, not only inside the country, but around the world, do we need some new money inside? Or if yes, what for? And second, you really are a person, your company is that created out-of-box solutions for distributed register, and you operate in Russia. Maybe you have some projects around the world. So if you take Russia, for what purposes consumers buy your solutions? Let me start from the second question, then I move to the first one. It seems to me it's an interesting moment with blockchain. It is actually applied that would be most useful and important in the future, because the focus was on open blockchain, and this focus slightly moved, and it will not come back soon, because they are not catching up technologically to the level that where things can be done that really could be legally meaningful and can help create some public registers on this public blockchain. And the situation is that those ideas came out, they are applied in enterprise systems. And this is not easy, it takes time. Last year, my company tried to figure out how to use blockchain in enterprise, and only now there is understanding that blockchain it's possible to use blockchain there, can be effective. That it does make sense to write all data on blockchain. There is a certain niche, which is that blockchain is a basic technology, foundational. It's not the level of application, but it's possibly doesn't make sense, but in combination with other technologies like AI, big data, and IoT, it gets a synergetic effect.
It's not empty words. This is really so. Blockchain works in conjunction with other technologies, and now we are beginning to get the understanding, and box solutions might not be useful, because in many systems people need blockchain. They need a simple solution to implement blockchain into their business process. Existing systems don't guarantee that by far. It's quite complicated. I won't name any names, but most popular systems, they're a type of platform solutions that are quite difficult to operate on the fly. Our solution is more turn of the key out of the box, but it's customized also, and it gives you understanding how you can quickly implement blockchain into your business process. We are getting close to production, and we can see some significant effect from blockchain. It exists, it accounts for the reduction of costs, so we don't see any direct profit from implementation of blockchain, but we see a reduction in losses and costs, reduction in man hours. For example, cash pooling system that we are making with Alpha Bank, it allows for fast cash pooling, because this is quite a lengthy process which takes a lot of documentation, and blockchain can speed it up. And this is a significant advantage to that. So it took some time to identify these niches, but now they've been located, and we'll see a new wave of blockchain implementation into enterprise. And enterprise and the government sector are going to be drivers. And this will happen for 2 or 3 years, maybe longer, and then I hope open blockchain systems will come back. Because technologically, let's not forget that open blockchain don't give you any guarantee. There is no 100% guarantee that the data recorded in open blockchain will remain there forever. And of course, this doesn't allow us to use open blockchain in the industrial or government level systems. So now the focus is on the enterprise. And as strange as it may seem, blockchain will find its niche. It is a part of a new generation of IT systems. We're inside the process now. We don't see it, but we are now seeing a change of generations in IT systems. So some of the things that could have been done a decade ago, even without blockchain, they're being implemented today, because everything takes time. And of course, we can see blockchain combined with other technologies, and they're changing the paradigm. It may not be the key part, the blockchain, but what is happening now is inevitable, and blockchain is a part of that. So I would like to be quite optimistic. Enterprise has quite good budgets, so I think for the nearest future the development of blockchain is going to move on account of business applications. And now coming back to the first question on payments, I think the case of payments is primary for blockchain. It has just so happened historically. It may have been better if it happened otherwise, but the people who made Bitcoin, they probably wanted to get some hype and wanted to show a really interesting solution, a really interesting application that can show blockchain, and they launched some decentralized private money. So it could have been different. And I wouldn't hope that when implementing blockchain into government payment systems, blockchain can change anything significantly. Bitcoin is a bit of a different story. We're not talking about, or we shouldn't be talking about, any new type of currency, but a new type of medium, a new environment where this money circulates. So we may see some, with the launch of government stable coins. I'm not sure it will lead to any breakthroughs, because what I don't understand the killer feature of these stable coins. I think another process has to happen, a process of transformation of traditional IT system and also banking systems into decentralization. So blockchain has to be a new medium for banking system. Stable coins, government launched, is a bit unclear. It may happen, it may derive some value, but initially it isn't obvious that it's there. And we need to switch all of the systems onto new rails. But if we try to make new products, new cryptocurrency products, and implement it, we get a contradiction at the ideological level that probably won't allow us to do it effectively. Thank you very much, Alexander. I agree with you completely on the change of the generation of IT systems. We are actually quite fragmented in discussing various systems. However, we have entered this era when all the systems are changing and they are affecting each other. And we haven't even begun to understand how do they work and what are we going to get at the end. But the systems affect each other. They're all interconnected. Fabio, you wanted to say something, please.
Yeah, to your point around stable coins and central bank digital currencies, I used to say the following, and I do this analogy to make it simple for people. The internet, it was the very first, as I call, pseudo-anarchic digital autonomous structure ever created by humans that enabled democratization of information exchange. And What we see on what happened with that, it means that enabled huge unbundling and reintermediation on all the services on top of the internet. Look at marketing before the internet and after the internet, right? We need to have chirurgical precision on that. Now we have blockchains, public blockchains mainly, which are pseudo-anarchic digital autonomous structures enabling value exchange on top of the internet. So what we are saying here and what we are seeing, it is a similar pattern, unbundling and reintermediation. So when we put this in perspective on central banks, okay, usually central banks look at money through the three functions of money, okay, medium of exchange, the store of value, and unit of account, okay? So now it is about, let's say, if we follow the same pattern, it means that public blockchains are enabling global liquidity democratization, okay? So which means it is unbundling and reintermediating the three functions of money. And that's why, let's say, answering to your question around, let's say, stable coins and central bank digital currencies, they are the nexus between these two new worlds, okay? So we need to look at how the financial service sector, or services mainly, will be unbundled through decentralized financing and what means value. Like, you know, we can say, okay, public blockchain could be a kind of a medium of exchange, okay? And in fact, if you see what central banks are doing worldwide, they were saying, hey, yeah, we can open up through sandboxes or open APIs because that's at the end not related to the store of value. This was okay by the time you look at the digital ecosystem from an economic stability point of view within the boundaries of your country. But now public blockchains are doing a global democratization of liquidity. So now you need to look at more broadly from an international balance of payment point of view. So having the right blend on the game that you're going to play at international balance of payment level and at domestic economy level, taking in consideration the unbundling and reintermediation of the three functions of money, this is where stablecoins and central bank digital currencies plays in.
Ну, я больше верю практикам.
Well, I believe more to the I believe the practicums and Alexander's response. Well, Alexander is an expert in the trade, and speaking of technologies and cryptocurrencies, in my opinion, I think he gave us a good understanding about new cases, new technologies create new opportunities, services interact, impact each other. The issue isn't that obvious. How can new technologies replace online payments, even in terms of trans-border payments? It isn't obvious. I'm not saying it isn't going to happen, but no one has yet put their finger on the specific advantage. So my question is for Artem. Artem, you are working in Russia, you are working in Malta, in Europe, and from the viewpoint of technologies and private and public cryptocurrencies, I would also like you to focus on the crypto assets and cryptocurrencies. How do you view the differences in regulation? Thanks to regulation or the lack of regulation, what was the industry able to achieve? And I'm not talking about hypes. I'm not talking about fast gains. I'm speaking of the financial industry and the consumer. And what do you feel in terms of our latest legislation on digital assets? What is it lacking? What is this piece of legislation lacking? Or it may be excessive in other terms. Thank you very much. Now, as to do with European, I won't tell you about European, but Maltese. I've been studying Maltese regulation over the last few years. I've been working with Maltese jurisdiction. And speaking of significant differences in approach, it seems to me that in Malta specifically and a number of other European jurisdictions, the regulator had tried to define a level playing field, the do's and don'ts. Others went a step further. Others tried to hype on this. And of course, you're aware of a number of smaller countries that stated that we're going to be crypto governments, cryptocurrencies come to us. But of course, we understood that traditional fiat connections to the traditional banking system are lacking. In Malta, over a year ago, a piece of legislation has been passed, which describes a large number of accounting practices, implementation, infrastructure requirements towards cryptocurrencies, also requirements to the persons operating with cryptocurrencies. Quite a lot of work has been done classifying the licenses of various types, so a lot of work has been done, and this spelled stronger regulation. A large number of European and non-European players entered Malta market. Malta isn't perfect in terms of access to the classic banking system because the banks are quite scared of this story. Everyone is a bit scared of the hype and the number of fraudulent operations and others, and opening accounts isn't straightforward yet still. But when the regulator presents game rules, and they can be tough rules, I can say that in Malta, EU anti-money laundering directive covers everyone that works with cryptocurrencies in the cryptocurrency environment. Even so the rules may be tough, but they are the rules, and this provides us assurance in that we can build our business, we can make our investments. But as to do with our law on digital assets, it's been in discussion for a long time. It's been deliberated. It's a fifth Pinopolis. It's the fifth time at Pinopolis we've been discussing that. So I think it would be great if we see some clearness in this regard, and the stakeholders and the market players can use that. My expectation is that this law will allow us to easily attract foreign investment, or on the other hand, will create a more comprehensive infrastructure for interaction of the professional market players. You are probably aware of tokenized securities issues now. There is a lot of talk about that today. It provides for removing significant number of intermediaries in the chain.
Or at least the regulation should be in place for the existing relationships in the industry, be that mining or be that digitize types of shares and other bonds. As far as I know, today's version does not describe all of these aspects. I think we could do more in terms of leveraging the technology in the new draft legislation, be that blockchain specifically or larger technological opportunities. We have to really overhaul the existing technological infrastructure, which was created 30 to 40 years ago, in fact. And we can learn, I believe, from the European experience in doing that. Okay, so we have two people who work in the field, and one is pro-closer system, a safer system, and the other person from the field is arguing for an open system, for a system that will be able to accommodate both Russian and international investors. Therefore, two opinions already in this panel. Therefore, it's really very difficult for us to take into account every wish, because we have to choose the fundamental principles. And we're not alone there in drafting this law. We understand the risks in digital currencies and what you mean in terms of other types of assets, such as securities and it's about a question of whether we try to fit the new legislation to the old processes. And you're right that those old processes and infrastructures need to be renovated. And we just try to rephrase in the new law these old processes. Well, I understand that you're a lawyer, and as it was already mentioned at the panel where the governor was present, you have a number of competencies, but as a moderator here, and since you have legal experience, I can task you with the specific formulation on how the infrastructure should change for the market of securities. So if you take this job, I'd be very happy. Well, thank you. Thank you for the compliments, and I will indeed be privileged to do this task. I know there's been a lot of discussion about this on many different platforms. You're correct in describing the situation as old infrastructure with new lingo added on top. We have old securities, and then we just add tokens and some new language. This doesn't really change things. So it's about changing the infrastructure. And the discussions have been around for a while, and one of the initiatives that's been active in it, Tokenization Standard Association, which collects best practices. And I think there we have the understanding, and it will also help us to formulate the clauses that you're interested in. We also hope that it's going to be fast and of high quality, because you're not going to have that much time. Okay, next question. A question to Sergey. Sergey, last year you made an investment in Gram. This will be Telegram's currency. Why did you do that? That's the first question. And second, did you just do that as an investor? Is it about the return that you're expecting because it's likely to hype soon? Or do you actually believe that this is going to be one of the standard currencies in 10 to 15 years? Well, thanks for the question. Slightly provocative, but I can take this one, I believe, because recently, in the last 3 years, I've analyzed a huge amount of blockchain-based projects. And my investment over this period included about 20 projects, and there was none which would directly work with blockchain only. And I never invested during an ICO. The only time I did that was with Ethereum, and I got lucky, and Bitfury, but it was also a while ago. That was equipment for mining, for Bitcoin mining. With Gram, that's the only ICO that I've been involved in. It's hard for me to tell. I just like the team that Pavel's working with. And I like their work in other technologies. Therefore, I'm just hopeful that they are the bright minds that will come up with a great solution. If you look at the token formula, it's an algorithm with increasing price. The token that I invested in, one of the first tokens, where I think the price was 0.37 cent, and pre-ICO token was valued at, I think, 2.80, but it was averaged. So this is the numbers that we got. So this algorithm gives us some hope that since you invest at 0.33, and then, so yes, you speculate on the price change, basically. But at the same time, I understand that Gram, together with Bitcoin and Ethereum, will be as volatile as the other two, and nobody can forecast what its value is going to be tomorrow. It can grow, it can drop, it can go boom, it can go boost. This is the risky part of my portfolio investment. Now I'd like to direct my question to Mei-Lo. Yesterday, we had the Deputy Governor of the People's Bank of China at the panel, who described in some detail the logic of China's decision to make their digital currency, partly as a replacement to the hard cash that is now in circulation in the country. At the same time, I've been informed from various sources, although they don't always agree between themselves, but they say that this digital currency issued by the People's Bank of China will also be available for transborder, transnational payments. My first question is that indeed the case? Second, what is the vision for this international expansion of the Chinese digital coin? And the next question is, I've heard from my other Chinese colleagues that the platform that China's People's Bank is creating for their digital currency will have digital wallets on that very platform. And then customers will have to transfer funds from their private banks onto the platform, which will be at China's People's Banks, and then from those wallets go back to pay for whatever they was bought for. And therefore, the commercial banks aren't very happy because they will lose these funds once they're transferred to the People's Bank platform. Perhaps it's too early to ask these specific questions, but this is really the nuts and bolts that I'm interested in. How can a national digital currency operate?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Bank of Russia to invite me here. It's really a great experience that the governor and the private sector can talk openly about a sensitive topic that's in China. So regarding the question, I think Olga definitely knows probably more than me about what the Bank of China is doing. But what I have known or researched is that there are two layers of this digital currency. So first of all, the Central Bank of China will give the currency to commercial banks or other financial intermediaries. And then we, individual customers, will get that from the commercial banks. So we don't get that directly from the central bank. And then, because this will provide incentives for the commercial banks or other financial intermediaries to join this project. In fact, the Central Bank of China has established a subsidiary company in Shenzhen, which is a fintech center of China, where the private high-tech companies like Tencent, Alibaba, they all have a minority share in that company, where they all together research into the technology behind this central bank digital currency, because this also creates a way to provide incentives for the private sector to join this technology development. Because actually, I think central bank thinks the private sector, like Tencent or Alibaba, actually has more technological advancement than actually the central banks. And also, they have more experience in dealing with this type of massive payment system. So that's why I think right now what China is doing, that they try to provide incentives for the private sector as well as the commercial bank and other financial intermediaries to work on this project together. Of course, this timetable hasn't been set because it's really a big thing, and I think the central bank has researched this for 5 years, but there's still some different opinions about how this technology will be implemented. It's not going to be purely based on blockchain. Probably blockchain is not going to be an option at all because blockchain has its drawbacks. But I think China is trying to prepare for the challenges in the future with all this situation, like internationally and domestically. So I think they're trying to prepare for the best right now and waiting to see what's going to be the time point where they're going to release this officially. I think that's the first question. And then in terms of how we have the wallets, like individual customers, that we really don't know. I think all the individual customers in China right now really doesn't know what is the real experience yet. Even though the head of the research institute responsible for designing the central government digital currency, he actually had an open course online to teach about central government digital currency, but because we are not using it, so I don't think a lot of individuals are actually listening to that course. I think it's just, right now it's a trial and error period, yeah.
Спасибо. Ну, действительно.
Thanks very much. The information that we see seems to be contradictory. Therefore, we will have to wait and see how it's going to be deployed, and perhaps the tactical changes will also take place, because this is a complex challenge. Your vision for the national digital currency, do you believe there has to be a two-tier system with intermediaries between the national bank and the commercial banks? There are such projects around, not quite ready yet, but the designs for this are. Or a one-level system where the central bank will have the wallets on their platform. What do you personally, as an expert, believe should be the case?
Yeah, I think China is trying to, the Central Bank of China is trying to make this project as smooth as possible and as conservative as possible, but at the same time to prepare for technology challenges. So I don't think right now they are going to just use the one layer where they just give the currency to individual customers, which I think to provide incentives for the commercial banks and other financial intermediaries, I think this is a correct choice. And also, I really don't think they have, because right now the high-tech technologies are really mastered by this Tencent, Alibaba, those giant tech firms. Central bank doesn't really have compatible experience with those firms. So in order to compromise different incentive and interests, I think it's a good idea to do the two layers, even though that doesn't sound very cool, but I think two layers is a practical and is a correct way. Yeah.
Thank you. With that, we will have to conclude our panel. Perhaps one last question to every panelist. They seem to be more relaxed now. Therefore, a question that I hope will catch them off guard. The Libra. The dawn of Libra, and your opinion about it. Is it a positive development for your company, for the financial system, for the financial landscape globally? And what are your personal expectations from the dawn of Libra? Fabio.
Yeah, I used to say, following what I said before about the similar pattern with the internet, right? I mean, the very first high-level company that tried to explode this notion of, or this illusion of disintermediation was Napster, right, with the music. So we might be thinking that whether Libra might become the first Napster of this value exchange era or not. And honestly, I don't care, because at the end, someone else finds its way. And I think that that's what we should be cared about. It is about enabling value exchange in a frictionless worldwide. It is about enabling more fluid liquidity globally. And I think that, at least for me, Libra, it is a good thing in terms of the mindset that is bringing the right attention on looking at the blurring between pseudo-anarchic systems for value exchange and not necessarily about a pseudo-anarchic world. I wrote a research last year that I titled The Illusion of Exterminating Central Powers with Blockchain. It is like thinking that with the internet as a pseudo-anarchic system, we will live in an anarchic world. That's not true. So for me, what Libra brought, it is minding the gap between this, let's say, utopian dream that everything will be cryptocurrencies, or that thing that let's look at just the underlying technology and don't care about the crypto.
Хорошо работать в Гартнере.
Well, it's nice to work at Gartner. You can have responses like that. You don't have to do policies, right? Alexander, I think Libra has little to do with blockchain per se, so I won't discuss it from this point of view. This is private money. Private money has had a long history. We've had centuries of history in private money. Each corporation wants to have their own private money. And, of course, the American regulator will have to ask questions. What if every company wants their own private money? This, I think, is a cause for concern. Therefore, for the Libra, I believe the future is vague. A lot has been invested, as far as I understand. They have a huge separate office, etc., etc., a lot of brain, a lot of power there, but I don't think you should really discuss it together with blockchain, because this is private money, as I said. This is corporate aggression. This is a corporation wanting you to bring everyone into their environment and introduce their own money in this environment. I think the best we should do is resist that. But I don't think they will necessarily succeed. Loretta, please.
So I think Libra did one thing. It brought the notion of cryptocurrencies to the forefront of everybody's conversation, from central banks to regulators to industry. My own belief is that I'm not sure we need to move control of things like money and currency into the hands of tech companies. Will the technology work? We don't know. They say they're going to launch, but if it seems to me it's not optimal for the world we want to live in, where everything is it's controlled under a number of tech companies.
Спасибо, Sergey.
Thank you, Sergey. Especially given your investment, I wonder how you're going to comment on this. Well, I do believe that in the future, at one point, one of the cryptocurrencies, I don't know which one, whether it's going to be Bitcoin or Ethereum, I don't think there's going to be that many. So there's going to be one currency that will eventually become the international standard of exchange. And therefore, I'm looking at a very small number of these potential players, those who can actually occupy this niche, who is going to win this game. I think we only need one that everyone's going to be accepting of. And I was interested in Libra. I gave a call to those people, one of the first, and they called back in a month, and they said, no, there's no line, so you can't take up your position, so you can just come in, and therefore Libra doesn't want to attract investment, so they don't know whether they're gonna actually come up with a working solution. I think that the regulator is, of course, fearful of such an economic giant as Facebook. And another topic that we should discuss is you have to really clear where to draw the line, but I think it will also take time. Yes, it's not just about finances, it's about the state, it's about the economy and politics as a huge chain of events that this can launch if we accept private money on this scale. Melo, what is your opinion? Perhaps I could foresee your response. China has chosen their own standard, but what is your expert opinion?
I led a research center on cryptocurrency in Tsinghua University, which is one of the top universities in China. So we have research on this Libra event, and then because they are using a Byzantine consensus scheme, which means that if the people over 2/3 of the stakeholders do something, they could possibly control the transactions. So initially we analyzed all the stakeholders, the initial version of the Libra, where they had 28 stakeholders, and 24 are related to the US. So only 4 of them are not related to US. So which means that of course, that probably won't happen, but if all these 24 firms are collaborating together, they could control the network, even though they say it's a decentralized network, but still it's very highly likely they could play some significant influence on this network. So that's why we view it as a very strong US-focused project instead of international. But I think it's a good thing which brings definitely attention of every country and also the individuals who have never been interested in blockchain. They probably hear about blockchain after the Libra event. There are 4 dimensions of this payment system. I think one dimension is that central bank of the country do their own currency, or the private enterprise of that country do the digital currency payment, or private enterprise do the international digital currency. That's what Libra is doing. Or the central government of one country doing international currency that could be used internationally. Of course, this is probably the dream of every country, but probably that doesn't happen. So I think right now the best response would be just to prepare for these challenges. Yeah. Is that what you expected, my answer?
Thank you very much, Artem. I've seen you turn very sad after you've taken up the challenge of writing the draft clauses for the law, but you still have some time. We're not expected right now. We can discuss the writing up after the panel. No, I was actually, yes, started drafting on my phone, and that's perhaps my face has turned sour. But as for Libra, I think that we have to existing scenarios, the ton and the gram from Telegram, and they don't seem to listen to any regulator. They attracted the capital via a well-known standard scheme, yes, but they don't expect to be regulated. They just want to do the issue, and then what we will see, the blockchain-based ton will also be an Ethereum-like means of exchange. And so far, they didn't do any agreement, any regulator checkups, no problem. But at the same time, Facebook did a similar thing, and they initiated the consultations with the regulator, and this caused a huge discussion, because I think private corporation, I don't think they imitate a crypto coin. This is not a cryptocurrency whatsoever, Libra, but they want to make their private money, and of course they will have to face a lot of hurdles, a lot of regulation, and many more years of discussion with the regulator, and I think it's unlikely that they will launch it. And because TON is not doing the same regulatory exercise, then they will just be successful rather than compared to Libra. We have 2 visionaries on the panel, Fabio and Sergey, people who believe that these new developments can change our world very fast. At the same time, we've had 2 people from the field who want, as May said, that we have to respond to that very fast. We're very different, but we've had a wonderful, intense dialogue. I'm sure that this topic will come back next year, and I'm also hope that not only the draft legislation will be there by the next year, the market needs, but that we also have better answers to the questions that we have set forth today. Thank you. Thanks so much for your attention.